Hello, my name is Rowan Jones. I am the project lead for the Trauma Informed Schools UK project that we are embarking on this term, which is funded by the Home Office and the Youth Endowment Fund. Thank you so much for your time for coming along. This session, this project briefing session, is really just going to be a bit of an outline into what Trauma Informed Schools does, the training that we deliver, who we are. That's going to be delivered by my colleague Julie, who will take over in a second. And then I will give a bit of an overview of what the project will look like for those schools that join on the ground, how it will look, what will actually happen, and the timeline. So over to you, Julie.
Hello, yes, I'm one of the directors of Trauma Informed Schools UK, and my remit is I'm the education lead and I'm responsible for national strategy and international strategy. And what I'm going to give you is just a brief overview of who we are, what our credentials are, and a little bit of what underpins our training. So first of all, a little bit about Trauma Informed Schools UK. We are a registered community interest organisation, and we came together in 2016 to really start to look and address the level of complexity of needs that schools were facing in terms of children's mental health and how that showed up in the classroom. And really, as a result of that complexity, of the impact that that was having on staff levels, staff stress levels, and their well-being. So we're a group of like-minded individuals that came together really from education and from a therapeutic background. We brought together the best of those two worlds to address the issues that we were seeing in schools. And what's really important for me is that this is not opinion-based. It is rigorously underpinned by a whole host of research and evidence-based effective trauma-informed and mental health practices for school staff, senior leads, and for staff supporting parents. And it's comes from a background of forensics, psychology, neuroscience, education, physiology, sociology, and medicine. It really brings together the most up-to-date, effective research-based practice. So a little bit about us in terms of what we've done in terms of our credentials. Each of our trainings, the whole school training is run by a top educationalist. The SLT training, senior leadership training, is run by an educationalist and a psychologist, bringing together and modelling the very best of those two worlds. And our practitioner training, again, it's always two trainers that bring together the best of both areas of work. We're a DFE approved provider in behaviour and mental health in schools, and an approved provider for the DFE funded senior mental health lead training. In terms of our background, really, as we cut our teeth as a workforce training provider for Head Start Kernow. It was a £9 million big lottery funded initiative in Cornwall, which we trained. Every school had staff who were facilitated in their training by us. We didn't just train the school staff, it was a community response to mental health. So we also trained health, social care, and the police and community and voluntary organisations. We also increasingly are being asked to provide training internationally, and this includes schools in Pakistan, West Africa, and we've recently returned from training Ukrainian teachers who are temporarily displaced in Lithuania, working with children who are also impacted by the war in Ukraine. To date, we've nearly 6,000 now schools, colleges and early years settings and community settings that have received training from us. And we have over 4,000 practitioners who've received the 11-day training. And we have 75 schools who have embedded the approach and gone on to achieve our Trauma and Mental Health Informed Schools and Organisations Awards. So also, all 22 local authorities in Wales have accessed our training and are really embedding the approach. So a little bit more about what we offer. As I say, we have experienced trainers with backgrounds in education, psychology and psychotherapy, All of our trainees have completed the 11-day training and then gone on to receive further development as our trainers. And they have all had pretty much experience in implementing this in education and really seeing that through. We have the 11-day diploma, which is delivered in 2-day modules over the period of around 6 months. And this is a level 5 diploma. It's accredited by the Centre for Child Mental Health and really equips individuals with the skills, knowledge and understanding to work with individual children, but also to act as a champion for embedding those approaches within the school. We have a 2-day senior leadership training, which is delivered for senior leaders to really understand the cultural change that is necessary, the policy that enables the practice to really embed the approach and move towards being trauma informed. We have a model of ongoing supervision and support. We don't have a CPD requirement that's annual for our practitioners, but what we do really insist on is that they access reflective supervision. This ensures that they stay mentally healthy in doing the work that they're doing, and it also enables us to ensure that the practice sticks to that we advocate in terms of the training. We have whole setting training, so this is for every member of staff, whatever their role in the school, whether it's mealtime supervisors or site managers or receptionists, as well as education staff. It's everybody's business and everybody has a role to play in this, and this really equips them with the understanding and some skills to be able to play their part. We also have consultancy, which is designed to support implementation to overcome the barriers that may occur. And we also, as we say, have the designated senior mental health lead training, although that's not covered by this particular project. We also deliver initial teacher education in conjunction with Sheffield Hallam University. So every initial teacher education student at Hallam, whether they are early years or post-16, and whether it's BEd or whether actually it's PGCE, every student receives a compulsory module during their training, really equipping them to deal with the current difficulties they may encounter in the classroom. We have an ongoing workforce development offer and continuing professional development that's available to those schools who engage in our training, and also to those who don't. It really enables schools to tailor the training and support for their staff to really reflect the local context. And this is as a whole host of webinars that are available. And as I mentioned earlier, we have the school and organisation awards that really recognise excellent practice. So a little bit more about what our training entails, and there are 2 key components for this. There are those that the first arm really is about the role of the practitioner and working with traumatized children and young people, and our focus really is to aid and support recovery and healing. So this involves really equipping practitioners with the understanding of the impact of trauma and ACEs, the theory of mind, and the theory of mental health and ill health, and how we can contribute towards that movement towards mental health. It really kind of unpicks the role of the emotionally available adult and equips them with active listening skills, and enables them through emotion-focused counselling to develop a coherent narrative for the child and support them to a corrective emotional experience and healing. And the other side of the other component of our training is really supporting and working towards whole school cultural change to ensure mental health and well-being for all. So we provide a whole host of interventions and policies that really equip schools to take a measurement of where they are and plan the steps towards becoming a trauma and mental health informed school. So finally, really, I think it's important to define what we mean by trauma. because I think we really understand the impact of those experiences of neglect and abuse on the individual, of how that changes kind of our behaviour and responses, and also kind of the alters the stress response. I think we really understand that. I think we also understand how those one-off catastrophic events that happen in everybody's lives can also have that same impact. So whether that is a car accident, a house fire, natural disaster, terrorist attack, or even indeed a global pandemic, again, I think we understand that. But we work with a much broader definition of trauma. So the first here definition comes from Tara Brach, and she looks at trauma being a response to any event that's encountered as an out of control or frightening experience that then disconnects us from all sense of resourcefulness, safety, coping, and love. And if we think about young people, much of their lives is experienced as out of control. They don't have say whether their parents move house. They don't have a say in moving from primary school to secondary school. They don't have a say about whether they have a new sibling, and they don't have a say about whether their parents stay together or split up. So much of life is experienced as out of their control. What frightens a child, it really doesn't take very much. And again, it's a deeply personal experience. And what frightens one individual may not frighten another. And it may be that for some children, they might look at the experience of others and think that, well, you know, in comparison, it's nothing significant, but it's not really comparable. It's about the effect on the individual of how that's received. And Margot's definition at the bottom there, it's not an event in itself, but an emotional response to a painful and shocking event. And this bit is key, where there was no one there to help you with what was happening at the time, no one to recognize your need and respond to it, whether it's physical or emotional, no one to help regulate you down from a high stress state, no one there to develop a coherent narrative about what has happened so that we don't fall into that negative self-referencing. This is my fault, I deserve this, it's because I'm unlovable or unworthy. Of really capturing that and being able to provide a more coherent narrative. And then finally, I think it's important to mention there is much peddled in social media about the myth around trauma-informed schools, that actually if you adopt a trauma-informed approach, that all hell will break loose because there are no rules or boundaries. And that is so not the truth. A fundamental principle of trauma-informed approaches is the creation of psychological safety, and with no rules or expectations or natural consequences, what you have is an environment of chaos. That is not trauma-informed practice. We absolutely do hold boundaries and limits and expectations, and we hold them firmly. Firm on expectation, but gentle on the child, so that they are still able to think well of themselves and still able to do the learning that's necessary in order to behave differently. We don't second guess for a moment when children get things wrong in literacy and in English and maths. What we do is sit beside them, support them to identify where they went wrong. We make an assessment about, is this a knowledge or a skill need that actually they just need more teaching? And then we support them and scaffold their development so that they can get it right the next time. And it should be exactly the same with behaviour. We should think about what it is that the child is missing, help them to really support them to identify what they've got wrong, and then scaffold their development so they can get it right next time. That's really crucial. So there's a little bit about us. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague, Rowan, who will take you through what being part of the project entails.
Okay, so I'm Rowan again, and I'm the project lead. So I'm going to be the main contact for all schools sort of throughout the process, the next 2 years really of this trial, if you're involved in it. So as Julie said, the approach that we take as trauma-informed schools is evidence-informed. We don't just make it up. It comes from a huge field of research. However, what we don't have is a robust evidence base for exactly how this approach impacts people within schools and on a large basis. So that's what this randomized control is really, and that's why we're really, really excited about taking part in it. So our project is part of a larger project, which is funded by the Home Office and by the Youth Endowment Fund. And the overarching research question is trauma-informed practice and its impact on youth violence. Now, within the scope of this trial, we're not going to be looking at violence, but what we will look at are the precursors to violence. So we'll be looking at outcomes such as externalizing behaviour, such as well-being and belonging, both of pupils and of staff, because that's important, as well as attendance and exclusions and staff retention. So they're the outcomes we're going to be looking at, because they're the things that we know sort of put children on that trajectory to youth violence later. So this is part of a larger project. The government are funding projects through the Youth Endowment Fund in social care, in criminal justice and in education, and we're the education arm of this. So in terms of who's involved, we've got three different parties. The Youth Endowment Fund are the people who are funding the project, and they will be the ones who take the findings and run with them and add them to their toolbox in terms of what helps with youth violence. You as schools won't have an awful lot to do with them. They've been absolutely a part of the process of designing the trial, of designing what we're going to be doing, both in terms of the delivery and the evaluation. But ongoing, they won't have an awful lot to do with you. Trauma Informed Schools UK, we're the delivery team, and we'll be the people coming and delivering training and consultancy and helping you, supporting you with implementation throughout the trial. The third party are the evaluation team. And for this trial, we have a combination of Ipsos, of the University of Kent, and of Tonic, and they are independent, and their job is really to administer the data collection, to keep the trial completely free of bias and make sure that it's fair what we're doing, and also to report on findings. Tonic have a bit of an additional role in there, in that they've been making sure that everything we do is also trauma informed, and so they've been doing teacher advisory boards, student advisory boards, looking at all the resources that we'll be using, things like that. But the trial has also gone through full ethical approval. So in terms of what we're looking for, we need mainstream secondary schools that are non-fee paying. It can be from anywhere in England, and you can have had some trauma-informed training before. We're finding more and more that all of schools will have had something. They will have had attachment training or trauma awareness training, something like that, and that's okay. The only caveat to that is if you've had our more intensive trainings. So if you have a practitioner in your school who's completed our 11-day diploma and is a TISUK practitioner, then unfortunately you can't take part in this trial because you've already got those skills there. The same can be said for doing the whole staff training. If you've done the whole staff training in the last 3 years, then unfortunately we can't include you in the trial, but other than that you're probably fine. As long as it hasn't been your main focus for the last year, and all your insets and all your staff meetings have been about trauma-informed practice, then which I'm not finding very much in the schools we've talked to, then you're absolutely fine. But do get in touch and have a conversation with us about that, because we're really happy to chat about the trauma-informed training that you've already had on a one-to-one basis, so that we can be sure about that. The last point here is just about not being currently involved in a different randomized control trial. That's only if it might conflict, if it's to do with behaviour and well-being, and that might have an impact both in terms of from your end in staff time, but also from our end in terms of a conflict in the evaluation. But I haven't found many schools who have so far. So this is the important slide, really. This is the timeline of exactly what will happen within schools if you join the trial. So the first thing that's going to happen is there will be a baseline survey, and that will be in all schools that join the trial. We're aiming to have 100 schools part of this, and all schools will have this survey. It will be for the current year 8 cohort, all the students in there, as well as staff. It will be a fairly short online survey, about 15-20 minutes, and they'll complete that, and the data will go back. And once we've got all schools to do that, we will have randomization. So in randomization, half the schools will be allocated a status as an intervention school and will get all of our training. Half the schools will be allocated a status as a control school and they will not get our training. We have no control over which schools are which. I've had lots of schools get in touch and say, well, can we be a part of it, but only if we're in intervention school? Unfortunately, it's the flip of a coin, or something like that. It's completely random. It will be a 50% chance. The only thing that we might put in is a geographical location for that, so that we don't have all of our control schools in the north and all of our intervention schools in the south. But other than that, it will be completely random. If you're a control school, that survey will be repeated for you at the end of the trial in March 2025. The only other thing that we will ask of you is for you to complete a questionnaire from the evaluation team about the other trauma-informed trainings that you might be doing, or anything else that you might be accessing throughout the trial which might impact the findings of this study. But it's not a huge amount of work for control schools. We also will give a financial incentive. I think it's going to be £500 just to say thank you for the time taking part in those surveys. But the key thing is here, we're not asking you to pause. We're not asking you to put everything on hold and not move forward and not do anything. You can do what you otherwise would have done. If you've got things planned, things in the pipeline, you carry on with that. What we're judging here is business as usual. The only thing you wouldn't be able to do until March 25, within the time frame of the trial, is do training with us, with Trauma Informed Schools UK, if you're a control school. So we're hoping that these schools randomization will happen and schools will be told whether they're intervention or control on the 1st of December. That's our plan. If you're an intervention school, we'll be then in touch very quickly about who you want to train, how many people you want to train, how to book onto all of the different trainings, so that we can really hit the ground running with that in January. So the top part of this Gantt chart, the bit in lovely rainbow colours, is the 6 different elements of our training. So I'll start at the top with the red one. The whole staff training, that's for everybody in your school, from the head teacher to the admin staff. You're often the first face that students see when they come in the morning. It's important for absolutely everyone to be involved in this. It's an online live 3-hour training. And some schools are opting to do that all together. They want to have everyone in the hall doing it as an inset, but lots of schools aren't. We will give you up to 30 different dates for that, some in the school day and some as twilight, so that staff can pick and choose and do it at different times. We'll also have a few which are split, so they're 2 1.5-hour sessions instead of the whole 3-hour sessions, because we're finding that makes it a bit easier to staff. As Julie said, that's sort of the basis of the approach, getting everybody involved, understanding that behaviour is about unmet needs, so that everybody within that school environment can meet those needs. And it's not just those skilled pastoralist team with a huge line outside their door, because that's where students often go when they need to escalate that behaviour and get those needs met. So it's getting everybody involved on this, talking the same language about this and understanding the needs of both the pupils and the staff within the school. So that whole staff training, there's then a second part of that in the autumn term. So autumn 24, same format. There'll be lots of different dates for people to book on, and it will be online and live. So that takes us to the second one, senior lead training. That's 2 days. Often it will probably be a week apart, a day in the week and then another day, 2 school days. That is a bit more in depth than the whole school training and really has a focus on the policy and practice and embedding this approach within a school community. And that is for approximately 6 of your SLT. If you've got a small school, it might be less. If you've got a bigger school, it might be slightly more. It really is up to you who comes along to that. And they don't officially have to be part of your core SLT if they're taking a lead in terms of overseeing this approach, but they're more extended SLT, that's absolutely fine. It's up to you who comes along to those ones. And again, there will be different cohorts, so that not all of SLT have to be out at the same time. 2 down from that, the network consultancy, that really supports that SLT training. So the SLT training will be within that spring term 24. You'll then have 3 meetings, one in the summer term, one in the autumn term, and one in the next spring term, with one of our trauma-informed consultants who are hugely experienced in seeing this transformative change happen within institutions. And the point of those meetings is for a more individualized support in terms of embedding this. So you will have a chance to talk about what's happened in your school, the changes that have been made, where you want to be, how it's working within your community, anything that's happening which actually is a bit tricky, and getting support and advice with that. So going back up to the diploma training, thinking back to the slide when Julie was talking about the two different key components of what TIS does, this is the part which is about upskilling key individuals across the school in terms of trauma recovery and working with vulnerable and traumatized pupils. It doesn't have to be teachers. Often the people who go to the diploma 11-day training are TAs, our pastoral staff. We often ask that there's one person who can sort of oversee provision for those young people. So that might be the Senko, but it might not be. Again, that's up to you. So we're offering this for, again, around an average of about 6 people per school. It might be more, it might be less. It'll depend on what you want and also the size of your school. We recommend a minimum of 1 delegate going on that for every 250 pupils within your school. And that training is really in depth. Again, it's live, it's online. We use a lot of small breakout rooms. All delegates within that training have home groups, and we have additional staff who come on as home group tutors and really hold those small spaces that feel safe, so that delegates can practice the skills of empathic responses, of really looking at themselves and their own triggers and what is going on for them and how that might affect the relationships that they're making with the pupils they're working with. So there's the skills based, and there's also a huge amount in terms of understanding the environment, understanding the neuroscience behind behaviour and those unmet needs. And often these delegates who've been on the 11-day training become sort of champions of trauma-informed practice across the school. So going down to the last two elements, the reflective supervision, that will be for 1 or 2 in your school of the people who have completed the diploma training. And we will give them some additional training, again, different cohorts so that you can have different dates and online. And they will really equip that person or 2 people with the skills to run a reflective model within the school. We think supervision is so important. Staff who are dysregulated cannot regulate another. It's really important for those staff who are working with behaviour that challenges, working with children who often have quite difficult, painful life experiences that they need to talk about. It's important for those staff to also have that safe space to offload, to reflect on both professionally and personally the impact that's having on them, so that they can best support the children that they're working with. And the last element there, the webinar input, that's 4 webinars which we'll give your school access to. Some schools are opting to use them as part of PSHE or part of the curriculum, but it's absolutely fine not to. You can use them how you like, really. One of them is just for staff on racial trauma, because that's a really important and key underpinning part of what we do. And the other 3 are a bit of a mix. It's about getting students to think psychologically. So there's a lot about healthy and unhealthy relationships, about, again, behaviour, having curiosity about their own behaviour and the root of that, what the underlying feelings are there. But also there's a certain amount in terms of basic brain science, basic neuroscience, and lived experience. So we have some wonderful people who we work with who talk very eloquently and movingly about their own experiences at school, what was going on for them in terms of the behaviour they were displaying, and actually what was also going on in terms of their brain and outside of school, and the journey that took them on, and the trajectory, and how they managed to turn that around. So really giving hope to some children that might be struggling at that point. So a really, really important part of what we do. So that's the 6 key elements of the training. All of that will happen between January 2024 and March 2025. And all of it will be online, will be live, and there'll be different options for when staff want to join. It's about £12,000 worth of training in total if you were to access it outside the scope of this trial. But obviously in this trial, it's completely free. It's funded by YEF and by the Home Office. Back to the evaluation at the bottom. So control schools, as I said, they just do those surveys at the beginning, at the end. All schools do them. That's all there will be for control schools. For intervention schools, there will be a little bit more for some schools. About 20 schools will be chosen to have some staff interviews, and there'll be 5 schools that will be picked as case studies. And if you opt to continue with that, then you will have some slightly more in-depth focus groups with both children and staff within the school, and there'll be an additional financial incentive for that. So I think that's pretty much all in terms of what the project will look like on the ground for schools. So I'm going to stop sharing. If you want to join, if you want to sign up, we're on a fairly short timeline now because we're due to start this project, the surveys, at the beginning of November, but we do still have a couple of weeks. We'd be very up for getting an application from you. We have a document called a Memorandum of Understanding, which really outlines all the details that I've talked about and the expectations and responsibilities of you as schools, of us as the delivery team, and also of the evaluation team. It is signing and returning that document to us that marks you as part of our trial, so that we can then get the link to you for the surveys, move into randomisation, and then you'd be told whether you are allocated a status as an intervention school or a control school. So if you would like that document, then get in touch with me. My email address is rowan@traumainformedschools.co.uk, and I'm pretty good at responding to emails and getting that document out to the people that want it. Time is of the essence, but we are still very much able to take applications and keen to have you on board. So thank you ever so much for your time. And if you've got any queries, get in touch with us.